Good morning, Grace Tribe. Let me make sure we have our music turned off. I think we do. We are good to go. Welcome to the live broadcast of Mike 2 Daniel Live. We are unbelievably, in episode, let's see, where is it? There it is, 437. Freedom, Focus, and Fullness for Tuesday. Tuesday, that's today if you're watching live. If you're not watching live, want to welcome all of the folks that will watch this later, all the people that you share it with and that I share it with and that catch the broadcast on social media or wherever they are, on the website maybe. Uh, we're recording this on Tuesday. So what does it look like to live in freedom, focus, and fullness that is ours in Christ for Tuesday, for today, for right now? I'm excited to share this with you. It's wonderful to see you guys coming on. We've got 36 people, it looks like, on social media. I never know how many are on YouTube, but or on the website, but it's great to see you guys. Diana, good morning. Dennis, good morning. June, good morning. Rainey, good morning. Rob and Ronnie, good morning, you guys. I'm really glad that you're here. Focus, this idea. Good morning, Lori. Wonderful to see you. Glad you're here. Focus. We talk about focus a lot. In fact, I'm going to talk about how much I talk about focus. But focus, Amy, good morning. Wonderful to see you. As the comments come on, I see them. I don't see who joins. I just see the comments. It's wonderful to see you this morning. Listen, focus, this idea of focusing is actually counterintuitive. It's not what you might think. Good morning, Sheila and Kat and Rob. Wonderful to see you guys. Thank you for being here. Focusing is not maybe what we often think that it is. It's counterintuitive. When I was going to grab my camera, but I didn't. All right. So let me tell you a pertinent story today. When I was setting up my camera, I was wearing this t-shirt, my little vinyl. Yeah, I'm a vinyl head, collect vinyl, play vinyl, love 2-channel audio, analog. Yay! I'm old school. So when I was just wearing this t-shirt and I was getting ready this morning, it's a little cool. I mean, it's not cold for winter, but for San Antonio, it's 50 or something. And so it's a little cool out, and I was a little chilled getting ready, going downstairs and getting my second glorious cup of coffee this morning. And so I came in and was setting up a little bit and thought, okay, I'm going to go grab this sweatshirt. I had this one in mind. So I, looked around my office and didn't see it because it's often in here. And I went down the hallway and went into my closet and saw that a pair of slacks I had hung up were sliding off of the hanger. And I really didn't want them piled up on the floor. So I'm not very anal about those things usually. But I pulled them off and started to fix them. But I made it worse. And so I had to put down stuff that I was holding and fold the pants and stick it on the hanger and put that back up. And then I started to dig through where I thought I had tossed my little sweatshirt, and it wasn't there. And so as I'm leaving, I realized that I had gotten something on my shirt. And so I went over to the sink in the bathroom and started to clean my shirt. And y'all remember what I was looking for? I was looking for this sweatshirt. And then as I was leaving, I realized cleaning my shirt, I had somehow, I don't know if I hit it with the towel or whatever, but my hair was sticking out funny, which I usually don't care much about, but I thought, well, I'm right here. So I brushed my hair, and then I laughed and talked to Stacey for a minute, laughed at myself, made fun of myself, fixing my hair to her. And so then I left, and the dog wanted to come out. So I, told Louie to go back in because she's going to feed him and stuff. And so I shut the door and came down the hallway and sat down here, ready to go, 5 minutes to spare, ready to go, ready to look at my notes, and thought, I never found my jacket. So I went downstairs, looked in the closet downstairs. There's my jacket, came back up, sat down, didn't have my coffee. So I went back into the bathroom, got my coffee, came back, sat down, was ready to go, knocked the phone, the camera phone off of the where I have it. And so I picked it back up, messed up the camera, fixed it on the tripod, finally got everything going, and was just laughing at myself that today we're talking about focus. It's awfully easy to not be about what we're about. It's awfully easy to not be about what we're really about. And now, under the lights in front of the camera talking to you guys, I'm going to have to take off my sweatshirt. Isn't that funny? Listen, that's all fine. I was watching my time. I knew I was pretty much ready to roll until I started to knock stuff over in my setup. Let's talk about focus. There were more steps in that process. I just didn't want to take more time. Let's talk about focus. And then I didn't get the camera. I was going to have a camera here. I have a shirt like this with a camera on it. I should have had that, and I could talk about the camera. Let's talk about bokeh. Do you know what bokeh is? Bokeh is the word for when you're sitting in front of a camera and the background gets blurry, even though the image that you're looking at doesn't change. So if there was a lot of bokeh in this image, you wouldn't be able to see, maybe even tell that that was a typewriter back there. I can't point to it very well. That typewriter back there, you might not be able to see it very clearly, but you could see me clearly. That would be great bokeh. And actually, bokeh would also be if the typewriter, where is it? There, the typewriter was in focus and I wasn't. If I was completely blurred because the camera shifted and focused on something behind me and I was blurred, that would still be great bokeh, B-O-K-E-H. If you're watching live or on the video later, you can see it spelled out for you. The way a camera achieves bokeh is there's this little shutter, this little flap of usually plastic or very light metal, maybe aluminum, inside the lens. And when you click the button to take a picture, some of you are so young, you've never taken a picture except on your phone, but we used to have these things called cameras. And when you press the button, it will flip open that shutter and let light through. Oh, this is profound, folks. It lets light through the lens and makes an imprint of everything the light is bouncing off in the world, makes an imprint of that light reflected into the camera. And what's a typewriter? Robert says, y'all are awesome. And then the shutter closes because if it gets too much light, it just goes white, right? All the light is coming in and it just blankets that sensor or the film back in the old days with so much light that you can't distinguish anything. It's overexposed. Maybe you've heard that phrase. So when that imprint is made on the film or in the digital world on the sensor, then the shutter closes. There's another element to that that determines what's in focus. So if you take a picture of me with a camera, then the shutter flies open and light comes through the lens and it makes an imprint on the sensor or the film. And then the shutter closes. But the width of something called the aperture right behind the shutter opens and the aperture opens up to different degrees to determine how much of that image is in focus. Here's how it works. If you were to look at me with great focus, then you might notice that things behind me actually do go out of focus, or things behind your computer screen go out of focus because you're focusing so hard on me. The closer and narrower your focus is, the more things behind your focus get blurry. For a camera, that is determined by how wide the aperture is. Now, here's why I say all of that. Focus is counterintuitive because the wider the aperture, like it'd be like the wider your eyes are, right? The wider the aperture to let more light in, the narrower the focus is. If my aperture is this wide, then what it's doing is taking light in this way. It has to focus even more narrowly on a subject because think about the connecting dots of the sides of that aperture, that opening. So the wider the aperture, the narrower the focus. If I'm focusing on something right here, then my the aperture being really wide has to cut very narrowly to focus on that one thing. It makes everything else blurry. If I narrow my aperture, it's perspective. You're right, Rob. I should have used that word earlier. It's perspective. If I narrow my aperture, then the wider my focus. I can see things for a long way in focus. A lot is in focus if my aperture, my view is narrow. If my view is opened up, if my eyes are opened up, if the aperture is opened up, then the focus is actually narrowed. I don't know if that makes sense. I hope that it does. I was going to use my camera, but maybe it's just as well that I'm using my hands. With a wide aperture, let me maximize my camera angle here. With a wide aperture, I end up with a narrow angle. With the narrow aperture, I end up with a wider angle. So the wide aperture, here's the bottom line, folks. The wider the aperture, the narrower the focus. I don't want you to see less in life. I want you to focus on Christ in life. I want you to be a wide aperture Christian, that with everything going on around you, you and I see Christ with clarity, and everything else by comparison, you can see everything, but you see Christ at the forefront of everything. Focus in the Christian life doesn't mean seeing nothing else but Christ. Focus, when we talk about, and we'll look at a verse or two here in a moment, but when we talk about focusing on Christ, fixing our eyes on Christ, setting our heart and our mind on Christ, walking according to Christ, when we're centering all of our focus on Christ himself, it doesn't mean that we ignore everything. That doesn't mean you need to spend more time alone with God, though that's a wonderful thing. I'm not knocking it. But that's not what focus means. Focus means that when the rest of the world is around me, wasn't there a classic tune? I wrote out the words as best as I could remember them. I didn't look it up this morning. It was too early. There's a classic hymn that I grew up singing that says, "Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in his wonderful face, and the things of earth will grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace." Listen, the more my eyes are open to Christ, the more everything else is blurry by comparison. We're talking about focus. So I want you to live your whole life. I want you to see everything as it is, but I want you to do that with a focus upon Christ. Does it make sense? I want your eyes more open so Christ can be the narrower focus of your life. What would it look like in your work? Just think about it for a moment. Or in your family, for you to be focused on Christ and not on the crisis. See, we tend to go through life like this. So we have a narrow view. I'm just looking at the crisis with my child, just looking at Christ in my job. The problem is everything is in focus. It's a very wide focus with a very narrow angle aperture. People do that all the time, right? I look at the world like this, and the whole world is a distraction. Instead of focusing on Christ, I see everything. It's a mistake to say, I don't want you to look at anything but Jesus. No, I want you to see everything, but I want Jesus. It's like on a computer screen. You might have 3 or 4 windows open on your computer or on your phone, but what do you pull to the front? When I pull, let's say this video you're watching right now, when it's at the forefront, you might still have a spreadsheet running in the background. You might have an email that's open, but what's at the forefront? I want Christ to be at the forefront of everything in my life so that whatever else is going on, I'm not missing what Christ might be doing, what Christ might be showing me, what he might be doing with me at the forefront of my life. I'm not telling you not to run all of the other little apps of your world. I want Christ to be at the forefront. I want him to be brought to the front of everything else that is happening in my life. And I want that for you. We're going to talk more about this. Don't worry. But I frequently, in fact, on the screen, I wrote maybe daily. It's more often than daily. I probably quote Hebrews 12:2 15 times a day, not quite hourly. I quote it all the time because this is how we work. In the background of your life, the operating system of the believer is Christ. He is your life. He is what is running in your life. But so many other things clutter the screen of our mind that we forget he's running in the background. I want us to move him to the foreground, for us to be looking at him as the operating system that is running all of those things. Hebrews 12:2 says this, fixing our eyes, that's a deliberate choice, my friends. We're not fixing our eyes on something by accident. Well, actually, we do that all the time. It's just wherever our eyes might fall. You could go through the day and whatever pops up. You ever have the tyranny of, announcements on your phone? Something pops up and, oh, I got to deal with that. Something else pops up and I got to deal with that. Oh, so-and-so sent me an email. I got to deal with that. And whatever pops up is what you're dealing with. We got to not live our lives that way. Whatever happens to be happening to you is not the most important thing in your day. What would it look like for us to grow up and not forget that on the way to work, the car that we're driving, while we're not ignoring it, we're not pretending we're not driving, but it's something that we're doing as we're running with a focus on Christ. The people that are cutting you off in traffic are not the foremost thing happening in your life. I'm not saying run into the back of them because you're not paying attention. I'm saying see Christ in it. Instead of him being in the background behind everything else in your life, I hope to get through all of this stuff so I can get to focusing on God. What if he's running in the foreground and I see what he's doing? I'm focusing on him. My eyes are wide open to the reality of my spiritual life in this moment. What if maturity is more about seeing Christ in everything than narrowing our focus to the one crisis of the moment? Because all the enemy has to do is keep giving you more announcements, more focal points, more things happening, so that you never, ever, ever, ever consider what God might be doing in the moment. Hebrews 12:2 says, fixing our eyes upon Jesus, the author and the perfecter of our faith. Our life is lived by his grace being sufficient as we choose by faith to trust him. I'm believing upon Christ in this video instead of me striving in the video and when I'm done going, hey, God, how'd that go? I didn't think about you for the last 45 minutes. What if my focus is on him and me right now with you? What if in the middle of the tough meeting with your boss, you were thinking, okay, God, you've got this. I'm with you. I'm hearing him, but I'm attentive to you. What if you ever been in the car and you're driving along and you're talking to the person in your passenger seat, a spouse or a kid or a friend, and something comes on the radio and you're, let me listen to this. Maybe you didn't say but you're no longer listening to the person in the car. You're now listening to the guy on the radio. You ever done that? You're choosing your focus. I want you to choose Jesus. He's actually operating in the circumstances you're dealing with. See, focusing on him is not ignoring the person in front of you. It's trusting the person in front of you with him. Focusing on Christ is not ignoring that I've got to pay my bills this week. It's knowing that he is engaged with me in how I'm going to pay my bills. It's putting him at the forefront while everything else is running in the background. It's opening my eyes to the spiritual reality of my life so that my focus can be narrow on him and everything else can still be in view. That he becomes the focal point of every moment of my day. Now, when that doesn't happen, because, as I'm focusing on him, there's a fire that pops up over here. And so I narrow my gaze and widen my view so that I'm looking at the fire and other things are happening. And so I'm now focused on so many things. How could I ever manage them all? And then when I realize that I'm all caught up with many things, I've suddenly turned into Martha instead of Mary. Jesus said, only one thing is necessary. He didn't condemn Martha that she was busy getting the dinner ready and cleaning and taking care of things. He just said, I'm not going to take Mary away from the one important thing that needs to happen, and that's being focused on me. That doesn't mean that Martha shouldn't have been cleaning and cooking and getting ready and using her gifts of hospitality and administration for the gathering that she was having. He wasn't saying that. He never told Martha to stop. He said there's only one thing that's necessary. And if the only way that Mary can be Christ focused in the moment is to sit here at my feet, then I'm not going to tell her to stop being focused upon me. Martha, if you can think about me in the midst of everything that you're doing, that's fine. You're doing the one thing that's necessary. But don't mistake everything that you have to manage for the focal point of this moment, much less your life. You are not judged by how good the meal turns out. You are not judged by how clean the kitchen looks. You get to focus on me and be okay in relationship with me. Look at me and let everything else grow dim. Let everything else be a little fuzzy as I run in the forefront of your focus. Fixing our eyes on Jesus, who is the author. He's the one that causes our faith, and the perfecter, the one that completes, continues to completion. That's what that word means. Fills up, you might say, our faith. He gave it to us, he started it, and he fills it up. That doesn't mean we're not part of that process. I choose my focus, but he, as I focus on him, increases my capacity to stay focused upon him. His grace is sufficient, so it's a good thing that I'm looking at him instead of panicking with everything that pops up on my Solical browser. What if I saw the temptations of this world with Christ in the foreground? I would do what he did. I would go, my life is more than that. What if I saw the distractions of this world with Christ in the foreground? My life is not dependent on how well I somehow manage that. What if I saw gifting and ministry and service in light of Christ in the foreground? Not that it isn't important, but that it's him that's working in it. He's the one who causes and perfects, fills up, completes our faith as our eyes are fixed on him. It's not up to you to believe more. You can't. There's no switch on the wall over here that I can go flip and go, okay, today my faith has to be at maximum. Tomorrow I'll rest from my faith. I can't just believe more. But if I fix my eyes on him, then I learn to trust him in those circumstances that I might forget he exists in otherwise. And then when I realize I'm operating without focus on him, my job isn't to beat myself up for forgetting about him, for not paying attention to him, for not being attentive to him. My goal is to re-widen my eyes to the spiritual reality of this moment where he is at the forefront. Instead of beating myself up at how badly I've done focusing on him, start focusing on him. He scorned the shame of the cross, but endured it for the joy that was set before him of being in your everything. To be in relationship with you as you walk through anything. If you and I turned off our camera and met outside on the street and started walking down the road, we might be going, hey, isn't that kid over there cute? And what a pretty flower that is. Do you hear those birds chirping? We might be looking at all kinds of things, and that's great. We're doing it together. But what if in that process, we get started on a conversation and we don't notice anything, right? 3 cars could go by me, and if I were to stop and say, hey, what color was that last car? You'd be like, I have no idea, Mike. I was caught up in our conversation. That's what I want with Jesus. I want to be going through everything with him, and he gets to tell me and direct me, and in my attentiveness with him, operate with the world according to what he shows me, what he points to, what he's talking about, what he's doing. What Christ is about in the moment is never going to get you to a place of missing out on what you need. It feels like there's a great risk of being attentive relationally to Christ. What might I miss? What might I not do? What might I not take care of? How can I control everything in my life if my focus is on Christ instead of the other circumstances? Exactly. How can I control everything in my life if my focus is on what God is doing relationally with me in the moment? I can't, nor was I ever meant to. How can I watch out for everything I have to watch out for? How can I get everything done? How can I make everything happen? How can I make sure that this doesn't happen and that does and everything works the way it's supposed to work? It's so hard as it is. If I walk relationally with Christ, what if everything else falls away? What if I lose control of the world around me? Exactly. I want you to stop controlling, trying to control, pretending to control everything around you. For the joy of living forever in relationship with you, Jesus endured the cross, though he scorned the shame of the cross. He who was holy, he who was guiltless, took all of your guilt and shame to the cross. I can imagine how incompatible, how uncomfortable, how inappropriate that felt. I get embarrassed, and my actions, my behaviors warrant what he went through. He's the opposite. He never chose independence from the Father, much less rebellion, but he did choose the cross on my behalf to pay for my attempted rebellion, my attempted independence, my attempted self-deification, self-sovereignty. He died so that I could just live in a relationship with him, and then I'm afraid to give him my focus. The verse just prior to Hebrews 12:2 is talking about throwing off everything that entangles, like I threw off that gray jacket a moment ago, throwing off everything else so that I can run the race that God has laid out before me. Listen, we don't run the race by looking at how quickly our feet are turning over. We run the race by looking at the prize that is our current and forever relationship with Jesus Christ. Fixing our eyes on Jesus, right? Run the race laid out before you, fixing your eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. Ironically, if my focus is on him, then I don't experience life like this. Every emotional turn, every tangent, every conflict being a stumbling block to me. Ironically, fixing my eyes on Christ, I can more effectively run the race laid out before me. I don't forfeit the race just because I lose focus, but it sure does make the running smoother. I'm much less distracted by the wiles of the enemy. I'm much less susceptible to the deceit of the enemy when my eyes are fixed on him. Sheila, you're so right. I love that he, Christ himself, is the finish line, but he's also the race. He's the journey and the destination. He's the race and the ribbon and the reward. He's both the race and journey that we're running and the ribbon that we cross and the reward that we get. He's the treasure. He's the reward. Relationship with him is the way we walk and the truth we come to know, because it's relational, not didactic, not just informational, it's relational. And the revelation of walking in relationship with him is life, is Christ. Christ is life. Life is him. He is life. So he's the way that we walk relationally, to know him personally as the truth, to come to experience him increasingly as the life. He's the way, the truth, and the life. There is no other. He's the only way to walk. He's the journey. He's the race. He's the reward. He's the rest. He's everything. We aren't looking to Christ instead of the world. We're focusing upon him amidst everything else. I love what Jesus said to Martha. I'm not going to take Mary's focus from her. I just wish you had that focus regardless of what else you were doing. We've got to stop condemning Martha. Martha was not doing anything she shouldn't have been. She just wasn't doing the one thing she should have been. Only one thing is necessary. And Mary's chosen it, and I'll not take it from her. We aren't looking to Christ instead of everything else. We're opening our eyes to the spiritual reality of what he might be doing in the circumstance. We're seeing him at the forefront of everything around us. You don't make Jesus Lord. He was Lord before you showed up. So for me to be trying to manage everything for him or despite him or ignoring him is just a faux life. That's ignoring the reality that the one that is sovereign is with you in the midst of it. I love that God told the Israelites through Moses, was I not with you in the midst of the river? Was I not with you in the midst of it? I was in your midst. I walked with you. I walked among you. I'm there. How much more true is that with the indwelling Christ within you? He's in the midst of it. He sees it and is walking with it and is in charge of it all with you. And if I'm going through something that I don't like, which I am, and you are too, then what does it look like for him to be? There's lots of imminent things happening in my life. What would it look like for Christ to be preeminent amidst them all? There's lots of things going on in my life. What if God's intention is for me to engage with him in the spiritual reality of my moment, of my circumstances, because there's something bigger going on than this chair holding me up? What if God is in me while this chair is holding me up? What if all of the imminent things I'm trying to manage are subjugated to the one that is preeminent within me? Let me go. I'm going to say that again. Going back a slide here. We aren't looking to Christ instead of everything else. We're focusing upon him amidst everything else. And what we were talking about yesterday is when I realize that I am not doing that, it's not my goal to beat myself up because I wasn't focusing on him. It's my goal to regain focus, to move him back to the forefront of my thinking. It's okay that you're not great at that. Life is about learning Christ in all things. Life is about me learning him in me in the midst of everything else. Our perspective upon Christ doesn't negate everything else. It's actually the wider view, the wider open perspective of everything. Can you look, is this possible? Can you look to Jesus as your focus amidst other distractions? Could you right now be listening to him as you're listening to me? God, you show me what this means in my life. As I'm listening to Mike speak, what does this mean to me? Okay, I'm going to give you all an example. This is really embarrassing, but see, the enemy is such a jerk. I'm just going to embarrass myself, all right? Just a second ago, I put my arm up like this, and it's been about a year since I've been able, almost 8 months, 9 months, since I've been able to do any exercise. And what stands out to me on the video, because I'm looking at a monitor, I'm not looking in a mirror, so everything looks a little different. It's all reversed from what we normally see in a mirror. I see this and I think, wow, I look unhealthy. I do not look good. So as I'm talking about focusing on Christ, I suddenly am distracted by how bad I look. And I put my arm down and I kept talking. Did y'all see that happen? And God is showing me in the moment while I'm talking about what he's showing me that I can be about what he's doing instead of all of the distractions of the circumstances. Isn't that incredible? We get to choose as often as the enemy distracts us to recognize that we're being distracted from what God is doing, from being attentive and available to him in this moment. Can you choose to be attentive to him in what's happening around you? I didn't say that for affirmation. We do that kind of thing constantly, don't we? Don't we constantly allow everything around us to be distracting? Have you ever walked by the mirror and you saw yourself objectively and you went, wow, I'm old? That's a distraction from the reality that you are Christ's and you are eternal and he is with you. The enemy is in the deceiving and distracting business because he can't take the life of Christ from you, but he can sure distract you from walking according to the life that you have in him. Can you look to Jesus as your focal point amidst all of the other distractions so that you can throw off those things that the enemy would entangle you with instead of walking with him? When scripture talks about fixing your eyes on Jesus, this is what it's talking about. He's not saying never be around anyone or anything. You need to sit in a black room with your eyes closed by yourself with, noise canceling headphones on and focus just on Jesus. You know what? Just kill me now, because that does not sound like life. What if Christ is in me spiritually and relationally walking with me through everything so that I get to experience life with him at the forefront, preeminent over everything else, regardless how imminent it might seem? What if what he's about is showing me he's with me and for me and sovereign on my behalf in all things? What if he's just growing me up to be more attentive and available so that when he's doing something, I can join him and I experience his divine life and empowerment through me instead of missing it because I'm concerned about my skinny arms? Right? What if life is better than that? What if I discover that I can focus on him, not instead of everything else, but amidst everything else? And maybe I have to spend some time focused and communicating with him in isolation to even get comfortable with him. That's okay. I'm all for solitude with God. I would just rather you take it with you when you leave. I'm all for solitude with God. I just want you to take it with you when you leave. Here's a question of the day for you. It's on your screen. For those watching the video, we now have the podcast up and running. Rob, my kind captain of volunteers, is helping me make that happen. I so appreciate that. Marie is on that team too. Y'all are such a blessing to me. Here's the deal. What's the risk for you today to focus on Christ instead of other seemingly imminent things in your life and circumstances? What's the risk? What do you risk if Christ gets to be preeminent in your conversation with your family? What is at risk if Christ is preeminent and you're attentive and available to him as you're driving to work? What is at risk to be attentive and available and fully present with Christ in all things? You know what happened with the disciples and Jesus in the storm? He was sleeping. They said, "Don't you even care about us? The storm's going to kill us all. You don't even care about us." And he rebuked them. "Oh, you of little faith." Not because they were scared of the storm. It's okay. It's okay for babies to cry when they're hungry. It's okay. It's okay for me to get distracted by the things of the world. It's okay. I don't lose my sonship because I get distracted. It's okay. He rebuked them because they didn't believe that he cared about them and that he was preeminent. Let me wake up God and complain that my circumstances are bigger than he is. Like, are you kidding me? Jesus is not scared of your storm. Jesus is not panicked about your finances. Jesus wants more for your child or your marriage or your job than you do. But it may not be the same as you do because he's not worried about you. He's got you. Jesus is at rest in your circumstances and invites you to join him there because he is preeminent over everything that is seemingly imminent in your circumstances. What do you put at risk to focus on? And you have to trust him to do it, to focus on him in the midst of the storms of your life. Jesus rebuked the wind and the waves, and what happened to the disciples? They went, "Whoop, who's this guy that's a bigger deal than the big deal of our crisis?" And Jesus went back to sleep. What's at risk for you to focus on Christ amidst seemingly imminent things in your life? Can you afford to make Christ preeminent among all of those things? When I say every single week, we're not done, all right? When I say this every single week, I say just today, make it about knowing Christ more, growing in grace, and going to love other people like crazy. I'm not signing off yet, all right? When I say that every single day to you guys on this video, it's how I end our videos. I'm saying instead of making this crisis about fixing the crisis so that you're okay, make it about being with him and knowing him more in the midst of it. Change what this moment is about. Change what your drive to work is about. Change what that conversation with your family member is about. Change what your finances are about. Change what your energy and skills and history is about. Change what the crisis you went through years ago that taints everything the wrong color. Change what that is about. Make it about knowing him in the moment. Be fully present with Christ, who is fully present with you. There's only one thing that's necessary, and Mary chose it when Martha didn't. That doesn't mean you have to ignore everything else. That means that he's preeminent amidst everything else. Make the moment about knowing Christ, so that as you depend upon him instead of what you can do with everything that's happening, or as you get distracted, instead of beating yourself up about having been distracted, just open your eyes to the spiritual reality so that you can focus on Christ instead of the material, circumstantial, fleeting, temporal, external reality of circumstances that don't define you anyway. Maybe you can make this moment about what he's doing in this moment with you. And when you don't, stop beating yourself up. That's just another browser that pops up that says, you're not good enough. Oops, you're distracted. Boom. Oops, you're not good enough. You start closing windows and new windows keep popping up. The enemy is just trying to keep you from pulling Christ to the forefront. You don't have to fix everything and clear everything and get rid of everything and ignore everything. You just pull Christ to the forefront. Make the moment about knowing him in all of this. So that as you're choosing to fix your eyes on him and your trust upon him, you grow in your experience of him. That's really what it means to grow in grace. As I trust him, he proves himself faithful. So next time I'm quicker to go, you know what? When there's a crisis, I can walk through it with Christ. What might God do with you? We're so worried about, am I obeying? Am I doing enough? Am I dependent? Look, fix your eyes on Jesus. Set your heart and your mind on who and where you really are with him. He'll direct you. He'll empower you. He'll show you things. He'll invite you into things. Make this moment that you're in not about you being sovereign over the moment. Make it about him. Bring him to the forefront. Widen your gaze to the spiritual reality of the circumstance in which he completely merits your focus. And don't beat yourself up that you're so easily distracted by the enemy. So is everybody. Until we start to see things. Here's what happens. As I go through life choosing this, the Holy Spirit will put on my heart that I'm not doing it. And then I spend, a decade beating myself up that I can't keep focus. And then the Holy Spirit starts to teach me that I'm okay, even when I'm not focused upon Christ. I just don't feel okay because my focus is on the disaster of the moment. And so what happens is I start, instead of beating myself up, changing my focus. And it might have taken 6 months. Instead of beating myself for my distractions, I start focusing up on him instead. And then it takes 2 months. And then it takes 2 weeks. And then in the midst of the moment when I'm distracted, I remember him in it with me. And then before I walk into the circumstances, I'm attentive to him in it with me. And those places where I used to stumble into flesh patterns began to be a tool for God to remind me he's with me. So instead of me beating myself up, I'm reminded to look and be fully present with him, who is with me and never left me. And suddenly what the enemy means for distraction, God uses as a reminder. And the enemy starts to leave us alone, at least in that area of our life, because it's a reminder that I am with and need him who I have. That what I need is Christ in me, and what I've got is Christ in me, so I'm okay. When my worry reminds me to trust, the enemy stops throwing that browser window at me. Folks, really, 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 really make today just about knowing him. And when that's not what you're doing, don't get distracted by how badly you've done. Just widen your view to the spiritual reality of Christ, who is in you and with you and for you, and will live through you as you're available to him. Make today about knowing him. And when you're not doing that, start. When your focus is off, refocus. When you forget that he's with you, remember. The Holy Spirit reminds you that Christ is with you and he's sovereign, and the enemy beats you up that you forgot that in the first place. That's not why Christ reminded you so you'd be beat up. He reminded you so you would start enjoying him in that moment. He reminds you that he's enough so that you'll stop striving for what you think you lack, not so that you'll beat yourself up that you forgot that he was enough. The enemy's such a creep, but he's got nothing on you. Look, the enemy's got nothing on you. You have God in you. You've got the enemy out there distracting you. La la, he's throwing up pom-poms. He's shooting off fireworks. He's making lots of noise, trying to get you to shift your focus from Christ, who is the way, the truth, and the life. Whether you remember it or not, he's enough. So make this moment, make this day, make this year about you just wanting to know Christ, knowing him here and now, wherever here and now might be. Know Christ, grow in grace, and as you are attentive and available to him, not doing something for him so that you can be closer, you cannot be closer than in union with the indwelling Spirit, in union with Christ. Know him, grow in grace, and as you're available, of course he's going to love on other people through you. Obedience is a byproduct of our relationship, not the cause of it. Mary would have known anything that Jesus needed. Martha would have been clueless. So let's not get busy trying to obey. Let's get busy being attentive to Christ. And he will, through you, love one another like crazy. I want to thank y'all for tuning in. I know this is a big idea. Let's grow up a little bit and let go of these petty, God, I need you to do this and that and this and that and this. Not that he doesn't want to know everything that you need. He absolutely does, because he cares for you. But when we grow out of toddlerness and no longer need to be convinced that we're saved, which is just a distraction from the enemy, if I put my faith in him and what he did on the cross for me, I'm saved. I know who's Lord. I know who my salvation is in, and he saves me. I don't do it by getting saved better. He's done that. That's just an enemy distraction. But as I get past, am I redeemed? Has he bought me? Does he love me? Then I actually get to start living with him and knowing that I'm loved and cherished and supplied and significant and secure. I begin to start learning to believe him in everything instead of hoping I'm okay for eternity. Get past your redemption and start living in the moment with Jesus, who is the I am, not the maybe I'll be if you do well enough. You're already okay if your hope is in Christ. Let's make him the hope of this moment and the next moment and the next circumstance and the next conversation. Let's learn him as the I am in all things, not the I hope he will be one day. Let's rest in him for eternity so we can start resting in him in the moment. Love that y'all are here. Hope that you will connect beyond the broadcast. Come and join us online. We send out the Aroma newsletter a couple of times a week. We intend to. And so sign up for our newsletter. Find some other videos that might pertain to questions that you have, things that you're going through. Listen to a broadcast, and when you discover that it's not something that's useful to you, go just turn that one off and go to a different broadcast. Go and find some things that are useful to you in our library, growing library. Almost 500 messages since we started this live broadcast, and hundreds of nuggets from before that. Ask questions on the website. Share your prayer requests. I would love to connect with you. Love to connect with you beyond the broadcast. Thank you for being here. Tomorrow, we're going to talk about not just, yeah, I don't know if you saw the title, but you know, it talks about our focus. What we're talking about today talks about our fullness. Our fullness in Him is where we're headed tomorrow. What if I am walking with Christ and He is directing and engaging with me in all things? Then what I get to experience is His enoughness in the midst of my circumstantial, what feels like lack. Sure do love you guys. Thank you for being here. See you tomorrow.